This police officer thought he was above everything, but little did he know he was about to make the worst mistake of his life. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Samantha Johnson emerges from the shopping center, her hands filled with colorful bags brimming with purchases. The afternoon sun reflects off her face, highlighting her dark skin and accentuating the sparkle in her brown eyes. She walks with confidence, her high heels echoing against the concrete of the parking lot. Elegantly dressed in a navy blazer over a white blouse and well-fitted pants, Samantha exudes an aura of sophistication and professionalism. Her curly hair, tied in an elegant bun, sways gently with each step. The bags in her hands contain gifts for her husband and items for her office. She is a successful lawyer, known for her sharpness and determination. As she walks toward her car, Samantha smiles, satisfied with her shopping and eager to return home. She doesn't notice the stares she's attracted, nor does she have any idea of what is about to happen. Officer Mark Henderson, a middle-aged white man with graying hair and cold blue eyes, stands beside his police cruiser. His eyes narrow as he focuses on Samantha, and a look of suspicion forms on his wrinkled face. Years of ingrained prejudice start to surface in his mind. He observes the branded bag Samantha is carrying, her elegant attire, and immediately makes unfounded assumptions. How can she afford those things? He mutters to himself, his mind jumping to conclusions purely based on racial stereotypes. Henderson completely ignores the possibility that Samantha might be a successful professional, his distorted worldview not allowing for such a consideration. He adjusts his belt, feeling the weight of his gun as he decides he needs to investigate the situation. His heart races with a mix of adrenaline and poorly disguised prejudice. With determined steps, Henderson approaches Samantha. His body is tense, his right hand resting on the holster of his gun, a needless gesture that reveals his aggressive mindset. As he nears, he clears his throat loudly, causing Samantha to turn around. "Ma'am, I need you to stop where you are," he orders in a gruff voice. Samantha, surprised, instinctively complies. Henderson continues, his voice laced with false authority. "We've had reports of thefts in the area. Those bags, where did they come from?" His barely veiled accusation hangs in the air. Samantha's eyes widen in disbelief. She knows there haven't been any such reports, and that this approach is based purely on racial prejudice. Henderson, blinded by his own biases, doesn't realize the absurdity of his accusation, convinced of his own twisted righteousness. Keeping calm, Samantha takes a deep breath before responding. "Officer," she begins, her voice firm yet polite. "There's been a misunderstanding. I am Samantha Johnson, wife of Police Chief Thomas Johnson." She speaks clearly, hoping that mentioning her husband's name will make Henderson reconsider his actions. Samantha slowly reaches for her purse, intending to show her identification, but Henderson visibly tenses. "Please, officer," she continues, "I can show you my ID. This will clear everything up." Her eyes seek Henderson's, hoping to see a flicker of recognition or at least some doubt about his initial approach. However, what she finds is only a wall of disbelief and growing suspicion. The tension in the air is palpable, and Samantha realizes that her explanation is not having the desired effect. Samantha's explanation only serves to further inflame Henderson's distrust. His face contorts into a sneer of disbelief and anger. "Don't give me that story," he snarls, taking a threatening step toward her. "Do you think I'm stupid? I know Chief Johnson, and he sure as hell isn't married to—" He trails off, but the implied racial insult lingers in the air. Henderson's eyes blaze with a toxic mix of prejudice and misused authority. He grabs Samantha's arm roughly, causing her to drop the bags. "You're under arrest for obstructing justice and attempting to deceive an officer," he declares, his voice dripping with barely contained hostility. Fear begins to set in Samantha's eyes as she realizes the situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. Within seconds, the situation deteriorates drastically. Henderson, blinded by rage and prejudice, grabs Samantha with excessive force. He twists her arm behind her back, ignoring her cry of pain. "Stop resisting," he shouts, even though Samantha is offering no resistance at all. With unnecessary brutality, he shoves her against the nearest car, pressing her face against the cold metal. Samantha feels panic rising in her chest as Henderson applies more pressure, making it difficult for her to breathe. She tries to speak, to explain again, but her words are muffled by the officer's force. Bystanders start to gather, some filming the shocking scene with their phones. The sound of handcuffs being drawn echoes in the air, mingling with Samantha's muffled protests and the horrified murmurs of the onlookers. Despite the physical pain and overwhelming fear, Samantha fights to maintain control over her emotions. She knows that any overreaction could be used against her, potentially with fatal consequences. Breathing deeply, she forces her voice to remain calm and clear. "Officer Henderson," she says, enunciating each word carefully, "you are making a grave mistake. Please check my ID." Her hands tremble slightly, but she keeps them visible, aware of how any sudden movement could be interpreted. Samantha closes her eyes for a moment, visualizing her husband's face, drawing strength from it. She is painfully aware of the danger she is in. A black woman facing an armed and aggressive white police officer. Every second feels like an eternity as she waits, praying that someone will intervene or that Henderson will regain his senses. Henderson's rough hands clasp Samantha's wrists, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into her skin. She feels panic rising, her voice trembling slightly as she protests, "Officer, please, this is a mistake." But Henderson remains relentless, his face a mask of blind determination. He pulls Samantha's arms back with unnecessary force, completely ignoring her pleas for reason. The click of the handcuffs echoes in the air, each sound amplifying the horror of the situation. Samantha winces in pain but forces herself to stay as calm as possible, knowing that any sudden movement could make things worse. Around them, the world seems to slow down, the sounds of the bustling parking lot fading until all Samantha can hear is her own rapid breathing and Henderson's harsh voice reciting her rights. The injustice of the situation is suffocating, but Samantha clings to the hope that the truth will eventually come to light. Taking a deep breath to calm her frayed nerves, Samantha draws upon years of legal experience. Her voice gains a new firmness as she begins to speak. "Officer Henderson, I am formally stating that this is an illegal detention under the Fourth Amendment. There is no probable cause for this stop or arrest." She keeps her tone calm and professional, even as Henderson tightens the handcuffs. "Additionally, your actions constitute racial discrimination under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Samantha watches Henderson's reaction closely, noticing a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She continues, "I am fully cooperating, but I need you to understand the gravity of your actions. Every moment of this unjustified. This police officer thought he was above everything, but little did he know he was about to make the worst mistake of his life." Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Samantha Johnson emerges from the shopping center, her hands filled with colorful bags brimming with purchases. The afternoon sun reflects off her face, highlighting her dark skin and accentuating the sparkle in her brown eyes. She walks with confidence, her high heels echoing against the concrete of the parking lot. Elegantly dressed in a navy blazer over a white blouse and well-fitted pants, Samantha exudes an aura of sophistication and professionalism. Her curly hair, tied in an elegant bun, sways gently with each step. The bags in her hands contain gifts for her husband and items for her office. She is a successful lawyer, known for her sharpness and determination. As she walks toward her car, Samantha smiles, satisfied with her shopping and eager to return home. She doesn't notice the stares she's attracted, nor does she have any idea of what is about to happen. Officer Mark Henderson, a middle-aged white man with graying hair and cold blue eyes, stands beside his police cruiser. His eyes narrow as he focuses on Samantha, and a look of suspicion forms on his wrinkled face. Years of ingrained prejudice start to surface in his mind. He observes the branded bags Samantha is carrying, her elegant attire, and immediately makes unfounded assumptions. How can she afford those things? He mutters to himself, his mind jumping to conclusions purely based on racial stereotypes. Henderson completely ignores the possibility that Samantha might be a successful professional, his distorted worldview not allowing for such a consideration. He adjusts his belt feeling the weight of his gun as he decides he needs to investigate the situation. His heart races with a mix of adrenaline and poorly disguised prejudice. With determined steps, Henderson approaches Samantha. His body is tense, his right hand resting on the holster of his gun, a needless gesture that reveals his aggressive mindset. As he nears, he clears his throat loudly, causing Samantha to turn around. "Ma'am, I need you to stop where you are," he orders in a gruff voice. Samantha, surprised, instinctively complies. Henderson continues, his voice laced with false authority. "We've had reports of thefts in the area. Those bags, where did they come from?" His barely veiled accusation hangs in the air. Samantha's eyes widen in disbelief. She knows there haven't been any such reports, and that this approach is based purely on racial prejudice. Henderson, blinded by his own biases, doesn't realize the absurdity of his accusation, convinced of his own twisted righteousness. Keeping calm, Samantha takes a deep breath before responding. "Officer," she begins, her voice firm yet polite. "There's been a misunderstanding. I am Samantha Johnson, wife of Police Chief Thomas Johnson." She speaks clearly, hoping that mentioning her husband's name will make Henderson reconsider his actions. Samantha slowly reaches for her purse, intending to show her identification, but Henderson visibly tenses. "Please, officer," she continues, "I can show you my ID. This will clear everything up." Her eyes seek Henderson's, hoping to see a flicker of recognition or at least some doubt about his initial approach. However, what she finds is only a wall of disbelief and growing suspicion. The tension in the air is palpable, and Samantha realizes that her explanation is not having the desired effect. Samantha's explanation only serves to further inflame Henderson's distrust. His face contorts into a sneer of disbelief and anger. "Don't give me that story," he snarls, taking a threatening step toward her. "Do you think I'm stupid? I know Chief Johnson, and he sure as hell isn't married to—" He trails off, but the implied racial insult lingers in the air. Henderson's eyes blaze with a toxic mix of prejudice and misused authority. He grabs Samantha's arm roughly, causing her to drop the bags. "You're under arrest for obstructing justice and attempting to deceive an officer," he declares, his voice dripping with barely contained hostility. Fear begins to set in Samantha's eyes as she realizes the situation is rapidly spiraling out of control. Within seconds, the situation deteriorates drastically. Henderson, blinded by rage and prejudice, grabs Samantha with excessive force. He twists her arm behind her back, ignoring her cry of pain. "Stop resisting," he shouts, even though Samantha is offering no resistance at all. With unnecessary brutality, he shoves her against the nearest car, pressing her face against the cold metal. Samantha feels panic rising in her chest as Henderson applies more pressure, making it difficult for her to breathe. She tries to speak, to explain again, but her words are muffled by the officer's force. Bystanders start to gather, some filming the shocking scene with their phones. The sound of handcuffs being drawn echoes in the air, mingling with Samantha's muffled protests and the horrified murmurs of the onlookers. Despite the physical pain and overwhelming fear, Samantha fights to maintain control over her emotions. She knows that any overreaction could be used against her, potentially with fatal consequences. Breathing deeply, she forces her voice to remain calm and clear. "Officer Henderson," she says, enunciating each word carefully, "you are making a grave mistake. Please check my ID." Her hands tremble slightly, but she keeps them visible, aware of how any sudden movement could be interpreted. Samantha closes her eyes for a moment, visualizing her husband's face, drawing strength from it. She is painfully aware of the danger she is in, a black woman facing an armed and aggressive white police officer. Every second feels like an eternity as she waits, praying that someone will intervene or that Henderson will regain his senses. Henderson's rough hands clasp Samantha's wrists, the cold metal of the handcuffs biting into her skin. She feels panic rising, her voice trembling slightly as she protests, "Officer, please, this is a mistake." But Henderson remains relentless, his face a mask of blind determination. He pulls Samantha's arms back with unnecessary force, completely ignoring her pleas for reason. The click of the handcuffs echoes in the air, each sound amplifying the horror of the situation. Samantha winces in pain, but forces herself to stay as calm as possible, knowing that any sudden movement could make things worse. Around them, the world seems to slow down, the sounds of the bustling parking lot fading, until all Samantha can hear is her own rapid breathing and Henderson's harsh voice reciting her rights. The injustice of the situation is suffocating, but Samantha clings to the hope that the truth will eventually come to light. Taking a deep breath to calm her frayed nerves, Samantha draws upon years of legal experience. Her voice gains a new firmness as she begins to speak. "Officer Henderson, I am formally stating that this is an illegal detention under the Fourth Amendment. There is no probable cause for this stop or arrest." She keeps her tone calm and professional, even as Henderson tightens the handcuffs. "Additionally, your actions constitute racial discrimination under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Samantha watches Henderson's reaction closely, noticing a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. She continues, "I am fully cooperating, but I need you to understand the gravity of your actions. Every moment of this unjustified detention is being recorded in my memory for future legal proceedings." Her words are chosen carefully, balancing assertiveness with caution, knowing that the situation is still volatile. In the heat of the confrontation, Samantha's purse, hanging precariously from her shoulder, finally succumbs to gravity. It drops to the ground with a dull thud, its contents spilling across the asphalt of the parking lot. A cascade of personal items spreads out: lipstick, keys, pens, and most crucially, a series of official documents. Among them, an identification card slides across the ground, stopping at Henderson's feet. The sunlight glints off the official laminate, catching both Samantha's and the officer's attention. Samantha's heart races. There lies proof of her identity, so close yet out of reach. She watches anxiously, hoping Henderson will notice the document. Time seems to slow as the officer's eyes wander over the ground, finally landing on the gleaming card that could change everything. Henderson's eyes fixate on the fallen identification card, and his expression shifts dramatically. Shock washes over his face like a wave, replacing the anger that was there before. His mouth falls slightly open, words failing him as he processes the information before him. The card, official and unmistakable, confirms everything Samantha had been saying. Her photo smiles back at him beside the name Samantha Johnson and the title Wife of the Police Chief. Henderson's hands begin to tremble slightly, the reality of his monumental mistake settling in. He looks back at Samantha, seeing her for the first time without the filter of his prejudices. Sweat begins to form on his forehead as he comprehends the ramifications of his actions. The silence between them is deafening, heavy with the weight of injustice and Henderson's unforgivable error. Seeing the understanding dawning in Henderson's eyes, Samantha decides to solidify the revelation. With a dignity that defies the circumstances, she straightens as much as the handcuffs allow and speaks clearly. "As I was trying to tell you, Officer Henderson, I am Samantha Johnson, wife of Police Chief Thomas Johnson. That identification card on the ground will confirm that for you." Her voice does not waver, carrying the authority of someone used to being heard in courtrooms. She watches the emotions play across Henderson's face: shock, shame, fear. "I understand that you were doing your job," she continues, balancing firmness with a hint of compassion. "But I hope you can now see how your prejudices led you to make a grave mistake." The words hang in the air, their weight almost tangible as the scene unfolds. The attention of passers-by is captured one by one. Cell phones are drawn, cameras pointed at the confrontation. The soft sound of recordings being started fills the air. Samantha notices the growing number of digital witnesses, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over her. On one hand, she knows these recordings could be crucial in documenting the incident. On the other, the humiliation of being unjustly handcuffed is being immortalized. The looks of the spectators range from shocked to outraged, murmurs of disapproval growing louder. Some shout protests at Henderson, while others narrate what they are seeing to their cameras. The situation, already tense, gains a new dimension of public scrutiny. Henderson, belatedly realizing he is being filmed, seems to shrink under the weight of the accusatory stares. The reality of the situation finally hits Henderson like a ton of bricks. His face visibly pales, and beads of sweat begin to form on his forehead. With trembling hands, he quickly moves to remove the handcuffs from Samantha. I apologize, Mrs. Johnson," he stammers, his voice almost unrecognizable, stripped of its former arrogance. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." As he frees Samantha, Henderson throws nervous glances at the surrounding cell phone cameras, acutely aware that every move he makes is being recorded. He bends down to collect Samantha's scattered belongings in a clumsy attempt at courtesy. "Please, allow me to explain," he begins, but the words ring hollow, even to his own ears. The gravity of his actions and their potential consequences begin to set in, and Henderson realizes that a simple apology may not be enough to rectify the mistake he has made. Within minutes, the parking lot incident goes viral. Videos captured by witnesses are shared across all social media platforms, each repost amplifying the collective outrage. Hashtags like "Justice for Samantha" and "Racist Cop" begin to dominate local trends and soon reach national proportions. Fiery comments flood discussion sections, ranging from expressions of solidarity with Samantha to demands for Henderson's immediate dismissal. Social media analysts note an exponential rise in mentions of the local police department, most of them negative. Local influencers and activists seize the moment to highlight similar cases of racial discrimination, contextualizing the incident within a broader pattern of systemic injustice. The speed at which the news spreads catches the authorities off guard, leaving them scrambling to formulate an appropriate response. Within hours, what began as a parking lot encounter escalates into a national flashpoint, shining a spotlight on existing racial tensions within the community. Chief Thomas Johnson arrives at the parking lot like a storm. His official car screeches to a halt, and he steps out, his face a mask of barely contained fury. His eyes scan the scene, locating Samantha, and then locking onto Henderson. "What the hell is going on here?" his voice thunders, instantly silencing the surrounding buzz. He moves quickly to Samantha, his eyes softening momentarily as he checks to see if she's okay. Then his attention shifts back to Henderson, who seems to shrink under his gaze. "Explain yourself, officer," Johnson orders, his voice laced with authority and barely controlled anger. The contrast between his fury and his impeccable uniform is striking. The other officers present step back, sensing the tension in the air. Johnson places a protective arm around Samantha, but his body remains tense, ready for action. The arrival of the police chief elevates the situation to a new level of seriousness, and everyone present feels like they are witnessing the prelude to a much bigger storm. With a brusque gesture from Chief Johnson, two officers approach Henderson. "Officer Henderson, you are immediately suspended pending investigation," Johnson declares, his voice cutting. Pale and visibly shaken, Henderson hands over his badge and gun without protest. The officers escort him to a squad car, watched by a crowd of silent onlookers. On the way to the station, Henderson keeps his eyes fixed on his hands, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. In the interrogation room, he faces a panel of internal investigators. Their questions echo off the sterile walls. "What led you to approach Mrs. Johnson? Were you aware of departmental policies on racial profiling?" Henderson stammers through his responses, his former confidence completely evaporated. Cameras record every word, every expression, as the department braces for the inevitable scrutiny to come. Henderson's career hangs by a thread, and he begins to grasp the true cost of his biases. Sitting in the chief's office, Samantha tries to steady the trembling in her hands. The initial shock gives way to a turbulent mix of emotions: anger, fear, humiliation. She relives the moment the cuffs were placed on her wrists, the feeling of helplessness in the face of blatant prejudice. Silent tears stream down her face as she struggles to reconcile her identity as a respected lawyer and the wife of the police chief with the treatment she'd just endured. Flashbacks of the incident assault her, making her visibly shudder. A department social worker tries to offer comfort, but the words seem distant, inadequate. Samantha wonders how many others have gone through similar experiences without the privilege of her position to protect them. The injustice of the system she thought she knew so well now feels more personal, more painful. She knows she will have to be strong, that her voice will be crucial in the days to come. But at this moment, she allows herself to feel all the pain and confusion of the trauma she has just experienced. Local news vans converge on the police department, their satellite dishes rising like sentinels. Reporters, microphones in hand, broadcast live, their voices tinged with urgency. We are standing outside the police department, where a shocking incident of alleged racial profiling involving the wife of the police chief has just occurred. Criminal justice experts are quickly summoned to talk shows, dissecting every aspect of the case. Sensational headlines flash across screens. Racism at the heart of the police department. Investigative journalists begin digging into Henderson's past, uncovering troubling patterns of behavior. Passionate editorials appear online and in print, demanding systemic reforms. The story quickly transcends the local scope, drawing the attention of national networks. Every new detail that emerges fuels the news cycle, keeping the incident firmly at the center of public attention. The relentless coverage amplifies the pressure on the police department, turning a single incident into a flashpoint for broader discussions about police reform and racial justice. The Millbrook Police Department building becomes the epicenter of growing protests. Hundreds of demonstrators gather, holding signs and chanting for justice and reform. Community leaders demand an emergency meeting with Chief Johnson, their voices united in a chorus of outrage and demands for change. On social media, a letter-writing campaign gains momentum, flooding the mayor's and city council's offices with calls for immediate action. Civil rights organizations announce plans for an independent investigation, vowing to expose any systemic discriminatory practices. The police union issues a carefully worded statement, attempting to balance support for its members with acknowledgement of the seriousness of the situation. Inside the department, officers exchange tense glances, aware of the heightened scrutiny they now face. Chief Johnson calls a series of emergency meetings, struggling to navigate the evolving crisis. Community pressure mounts by the hour, forcing the department to confront long-ignored issues of bias, training, and accountability. In the privacy of their home office, Samantha and Thomas Johnson finally have a moment alone. The tension in the air is palpable. "How could this happen, Thomas?" Samantha asks, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. I thought we were making progress in the department." Thomas runs a hand over his face, the weight of the situation evident in his slumped shoulders. "Samantha, he begins, but the words fail him. Samantha cuts him off, years of frustration spilling over. "It's not enough, Thomas. How many times have we talked about implicit bias, about the need for better training?" Her voice rises, laden with pain and anger. Thomas tries to reach out, but she pulls back. "You don't understand. You can't fully understand," she says, tears in her eyes. This could have been much worse if I wasn't who I am." The silence that follows is deafening. Both know this conversation is just the beginning of a long, difficult process of confrontation and change, both personally and professionally. The police department's internal affairs division springs into action with unprecedented urgency. A specialized team is quickly assembled, led by veteran investigator Captain Maria Rodriguez. She transforms a conference room into an operations center, the walls soon covered with timelines, reports, and photos from the incident. Captain Rodriguez begins the process meticulously, requesting all body camera footage, past incident reports, and Henderson's performance evaluations. She personally interviews each witness, her calm but incisive approach extracting crucial details. The team combs through the department's stop and search protocols, looking for systemic failures that may have contributed to the incident. As the investigation progresses, it becomes clear that this case goes far beyond an isolated incident, revealing deeply entrenched issues of bias and inadequate training. Captain Rodriguez, aware of the public scrutiny, ensures complete transparency, providing regular updates to Chief Johnson and preparing for potential public hearings. The investigation promises to be exhaustive, leaving no stone unturned in the search for truth and accountability. Sitting in the austere interrogation room, Officer Mark Henderson faces the steely gaze of Captain Rodriguez. The air is thick with tension as she opens a thick folder. "Officer Henderson," she begins, her voice calculatedly neutral. "Let's discuss the events of the 15th. Henderson swallows hard, his uniform suddenly feeling too tight. The questions come in rapid succession, each more probing than the last. "What led you to approach Mrs. Johnson? Were you aware of departmental policy regarding racially biased stops?" Henderson stammers through his answers, his demeanor oscillating between defensive and regretful. Captain Rodriguez presses on relentlessly, confronting him with discrepancies between his account and the video evidence. As the interrogation continues, he begins to unravel, his justifications sounding increasingly hollow. Tears of frustration and shame well up in his eyes as he finally admits, I made a mistake. I let my biases control me." Captain Rodriguez carefully notes every word, knowing that this testimony will be crucial in the decisions to come. As the investigation deepens, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge from Henderson's past. Captain Rodriguez and her team unearth a series of complaints filed against him, all with a common theme: allegations of racial discrimination. A particularly troubling incident from 3 years ago resurfaces. Henderson had unjustly detained a young black student using excessive force. At the time, the case was quietly dismissed, resulting only in a verbal warning. Records of his performance evaluations reveal subtle comments about his aggressive approach in predominantly minority neighborhoods. Statistical analyses of his stops show a significant disparity in stop and search rates between white and black suspects. Colleagues, initially reluctant, begin to share stories of casual racist remarks made by Henderson. Each new piece of evidence adds another layer to the picture of an officer whose biases consistently shaped his actions over the years. Captain Rodriguez presses forward, determined to uncover every truth. Dismayed by the systemic failures that allowed this behavior to persist, Samantha Johnson realizes that Henderson's case is just the tip of the iceberg of a much larger problem within the department. Samantha steps into the testimony room, her upright posture masking the inner turmoil. As a lawyer, she's familiar with this environment, but being on the other side of the table is a surreal experience. Captain Rodriguez greets her respectfully, aware of the delicate nature of the situation. Samantha takes a deep breath and begins her account, her voice initially shaky, but gaining strength as she speaks. She meticulously describes each moment of the encounter, from Henderson's initial approach to the humiliating moment of being handcuffed. Her words paint a vivid picture of prejudice and abuse of power. Silent tears roll down her face as she recalls the fear and helplessness she felt. Captain Rodriguez listens intently, occasionally asking questions to clarify details. Drawing on her legal background, Samantha also offers insights into the legal and ethical violations committed. As she concludes her testimony, Samantha looks directly at the captain and says firmly, "This cannot keep happening, not to me, not to anyone." Her testimony, powerful and moving, promises to be a catalyst for significant change. Chief Tom Johnson feels the weight of the world on his shoulders as he faces a room full of reporters and community leaders. Camera flashes go off incessantly as he approaches the podium. "I'm here today," he begins, his voice heavy with restrained emotion, "to address the unacceptable incident involving Officer Henderson and my wife, Samantha Johnson." He proceeds to detail the immediate actions taken: Henderson's suspension, the ongoing investigation, and plans for a comprehensive review of departmental policies. Questions are fired from all sides, some accusatory, others demanding more drastic action. Johnson navigates carefully, promising full transparency and significant changes. Behind the scenes, he faces conflicting pressures. The police union demands due process for Henderson, while activists call for his immediate firing. The mayor, worried about the political fallout, pushes for swift results. Johnson knows that every decision he makes will be scrutinized, potentially defining his legacy as police chief. The tension is palpable as he balances the demands for justice with the need for lasting systemic reform. The streets outside City Hall are packed with protesters, their voices united in a chorus of outrage and demand for change. Signs raised high call for justice for Samantha and police reform now. Community leaders take turns at the microphone, sharing stories of similar encounters with police and demanding immediate action. The Reverend Angela Davis, a respected local activist, declares passionately, "What happened to Samantha Johnson is not an isolated incident. It's the symptom of a sick system that needs healing." Civil rights organizations present a list of demands, including mandatory anti-racism training, increased diversity in the police force, and the creation of a civilian oversight board. On social media, a viral campaign, "Reform Our Police," gains traction, with thousands sharing their own experiences of police discrimination. The pressure on the police department and city leaders is immense and growing. Packed community meetings become emotional forums where residents express their frustration and fear, demanding not just justice for Samantha, but a complete transformation in police culture. Sitting in her home office, Samantha contemplates a photo of her law school graduation. The smiling young woman in the picture seems distant now, separated by years of experiences that have shaped her understanding of the world. She reflects on how, despite her success and privileged position, she is still not immune to the deep-seated prejudices in society. The incident with Henderson has awakened long-suppressed memories, suspicious looks in luxury stores, condescending remarks from colleagues, subtle but painful moments of discrimination throughout her career. Samantha thinks of her parents, the struggles they faced, and the hopes they had for her. Silent tears slide down her face as she considers how many others have not been as fortunate to have her education, her resources, her voice. The injustice of the system she has fought against professionally for years now feels painfully personal. But amidst the pain, Samantha feels a growing determination. She realizes that her experience, as traumatic as it is, gives her a unique platform to effect change. With renewed resolve, she begins sketching plans to use her voice and position to fight systemic racism, not just in the police department but in society as a whole. Sitting in her office, Samantha contemplates the pile of support letters in front of her. Each message reinforces her conviction that she cannot remain silent. With renewed determination, she picks up the phone and calls her husband, Thomas. "We need to talk. I want to do more." The next day, Samantha presents a comprehensive plan to the department board. Her voice does not waver as she proposes a series of initiatives: mandatory bias training, a review of use of force policies, and the creation of a civilian oversight committee. She offers to lead some of these efforts, leveraging her legal experience and unique perspective as both a victim and the chief's wife. Some board members seem uncomfortable, but Samantha stands firm. "This isn't just about me," she emphasizes. "It's about building a department that truly serves and protects all members of the community." At the end of the presentation, there is a thoughtful silence in the room. Samantha knows the road ahead will be challenging, but she is ready for the fight. Her personal experience has become a catalyst for change, and she is determined to see it through. In the quiet of his suspension, Henderson faces a metaphorical and literal mirror. Sitting in his living room, he replays the video of his interaction with Samantha over and over, increasingly horrified by his own actions. The sound of his voice, laced with prejudice, makes him cringe. A stack of books on systemic racism and white privilege, recommended by the department therapist, sits beside him. Initially resistant, Henderson now devours them, each page revealing layers of biases he didn't even know he had. Memories of his childhood in a predominantly white neighborhood resurface, and he begins to understand how these experiences shaped his worldview. In a moment of painful clarity, Henderson realizes that his actions were not an isolated incident, but the result of years of unexamined prejudice. Tears stream down his face as he finally admits to himself, "I am part of the problem." This realization is both devastating and liberating. Henderson knows he has a long road ahead, but for the first time, he is truly committed to change, not just for his career, but out of a genuine desire to be better. Chief Thomas Johnson stands before his assembled department, his expression grave, reflecting the seriousness of the moment. "What happened to my wife," he begins, "is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a larger problem that we must address." He then outlines a series of comprehensive measures: mandatory implicit bias training for all officers, a full review of use of force policies, implementation of body cameras with strict review protocols, and the creation of a diversity and inclusion task force led by community members. Johnson also announces the hiring of a racial justice specialist to oversee these changes. This will not be easy, he admits, noting the discomfort on some faces, but it is necessary and long overdue. He concludes with a personal plea. I ask each of you to look in the mirror and do the hard work of confronting your own biases. I know I am doing mine. The measures are met with a mix of applause and apprehensive murmurs, signaling the start of a deep and challenging transformation within the department. The police department auditorium is packed, a sea of blue uniforms facing Samantha as she stands. On the stage, Samantha takes a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. I'm here today, she begins, not as the chief's wife, but as a black woman who has directly experienced the impact of racial bias in action. The silence is palpable as she shares her story, sparing no details of the humiliation and fear she felt. Then she shifts gears, engaging the officers in interactive exercises designed to reveal unconscious biases. There are moments of discomfort, even resistance, but Samantha navigates them skillfully, using her experience as a lawyer to keep the discussion productive. She presents studies, statistics, and most powerfully testimonials from community members. By the end of the workshop, many officers approach her, some with tears in their eyes, to thank her and share their own realizations. Samantha knows that one workshop cannot change years of conditioning, but she sees it as a crucial step in the department's journey toward transformation. Henderson stands nervously before a support group for officers dealing with racial biases. My name is Mark, he begins, his voice trembling, and I made a terrible mistake. He shares his story, not shying away from the ugliness of his actions. The group listens in silence, some nodding in recognition. In the months since the incident, Henderson has immersed himself in an intense process of self-reflection and education. He has spent hours talking to community leaders, listening to the experiences of people of color, and challenging his own ingrained assumptions. Now he is determined to use his experience to educate other officers. Henderson begins working with the training department, sharing his journey as a warning and a call to change. He knows some see him as a traitor, while others remain skeptical of his transformation. But Henderson persists, driven by a genuine desire to repair the damage he has caused and prevent others from making the same mistakes. His journey of redemption is difficult and often painful, but he faces it with a determination born of regret and hope. The community room is buzzing with energy as residents from all walks of life gather to discuss the changes in the police department. Religious leaders sit alongside activists. Business owners chat with educators, all united by a common goal. Maria Rodriguez, a local community organizer, takes the floor. This is our chance to shape the future of our police force, she declares. Ideas flow freely, mentorship programs between officers and youth, open house days at the department, joint community patrols. A fund is established to support ongoing anti-racism training for officers. Volunteers sign up to serve on the new Civilian Oversight Board. Reverend Jackson, a respected leader in the black community, offers his church's facilities for regular meetings between officers and residents. It's time to build bridges, he declares. The atmosphere is one of cautious optimism. Everyone acknowledges that real change will take time and sustained effort, but there is a palpable sense of hope in the air. This community mobilization signals a new chapter in the relationship between the police and the citizens they serve. Samantha and Thomas sit on a park bench, the same one they used to spend hours on during their courtship. The silence between them is heavy, laden with unspoken words and repressed emotions. Finally, Thomas speaks. Sam, I failed you as a husband and as a police chief. His voice trembles with restrained emotion. Samantha looks at him, seeing the pain in his eyes. Yes, you did fail, she responds softly. But you're also working to fix it. They begin to talk, really talk, for the first time since the incident. Samantha openly shares her fear, her anger, her disappointment. Thomas listens, really listens, realizing for the first time the full weight of her experience. He shares his own feelings of guilt and inadequacy, his commitment to doing better. Tears are shed. Hands are held. It's not a magical healing, but it's a start. They decide to seek couples counseling, recognizing that healing will take time. As they walk back home hand in hand, there is a new understanding between them. Trust has been shaken, but not irreparably broken. Together they are committed to rebuilding it, one day at a time. The Millbrook Police Department is unrecognizable. The once austere hallways now display colorful murals celebrating the diversity of the community. The briefing room has been transformed into a dialogue space, with chairs arranged in a circle to facilitate open discussions. New faces populate the department, officers of different ethnicities, genders, and backgrounds better reflecting the population they serve. Chief Johnson has implemented a partnership system, pairing veteran officers with new recruits from diverse backgrounds to foster mutual learning. The old interrogation room now houses a community mediation center, where minor conflicts are resolved through dialogue. Body cameras are standard, with a strict review protocol involving civilian oversight. The training curriculum has been completely rewritten, emphasizing de-escalation, cultural competency, and mental health. A psychologist is now on staff full-time, offering support for both officers and community members. The transformation is more than cosmetic. There is a palpable shift in the atmosphere, a sense of renewed purpose and commitment to true justice. The Millbrook Police Department is becoming a model for progressive police reform. Mark Henderson steps hesitantly into the classroom at the local university. The Re-Education and Sensitivity Program, a collaboration between the police department and the sociology faculty, is his last chance at redemption. Over the course of 6 intensive months, Henderson is immersed in studies on racial history, the psychology of prejudice, and restorative justice. He participates in panels with victims of police discrimination, their stories cutting deep into his conscience. In Theater of the Oppressed workshops, he is forced to experience situations from another point of view, often leaving the sessions emotionally exhausted. The turning point comes during a weekend retreat with community leaders. Sharing meals and stories, Henderson begins to see beyond stereotypes, recognizing the common humanity that binds them. He openly weeps as he asks for forgiveness, a moment of catharsis that marks the start of his true transformation. By the end of the program, Henderson is not just more educated, but deeply changed. He understands now that his work of personal growth and reparation is an ongoing journey, not a final destination. Samantha and Thomas sit side by side in the conference room, a stack of documents between them. As a team, they meticulously review every department policy, identifying and correcting biased language and problematic practices. Samantha brings her legal expertise and perspective as a Black woman, while Thomas offers operational insights. Together, they develop a new code of conduct that emphasizes fairness and respect. They implement a system of checkpoints to ensure that police stops are conducted fairly and without bias. They create a peer review process for incidents involving the use of force, ensuring accountability. One of the most significant changes is the introduction of a community policing program, where officers are assigned to specific neighborhoods long-term, allowing them to build genuine relationships with residents. Samantha and Thomas often disagree, sometimes heatedly, but their shared commitment to reform keeps them moving forward. Their nights are long but rewarding, knowing that each policy they revise is a step toward a fairer and more effective police department. The police department gymnasium has been transformed into an immersive learning environment. Officers of all ranks participate in an intensive 2-week training on bias and racial justice. The program, developed in collaboration with civil rights experts and psychologists, is multifaceted and challenging. In the mornings, officers attend lectures on the history of racism in law enforcement, exploring how seemingly neutral policies can have discriminatory impacts. In the afternoons, they engage in simulation exercises, confronting challenging scenarios that test their new knowledge. One particularly impactful day involves a panel of people who have been unjustly targeted by police actions. their emotional stories silencing even the most skeptical officers. Participants keep reflection journals, documenting their struggles and insights. The training doesn't shy away from difficult topics. White privilege, microaggressions, and intergenerational trauma are discussed openly. Many officers, initially resistant, find themselves deeply affected, reevaluating their own attitudes and behaviors. By the end of the 2 weeks, there is a palpable sense of change in the air, with many officers expressing a renewed commitment to fair and equitable policing. The streets of Millbrook witness a subtle but significant change. Police officers, once viewed with suspicion, are now seen engaging positively with residents. In the local park, an officer plays basketball with teenagers, building trust and connection. Relationships are being built through sport at a community fair, where officers hand out information about crime prevention programs. Their interactions are marked by smiles and friendly conversations. When a tense situation arises in a troubled neighborhood, residents watch in surprise as officers use de-escalation techniques, resolving the conflict without violence. Statistics begin to tell an encouraging story: a drop in complaints against the police, an increase in community cooperation in solving crimes. At a city council meeting, longtime residents express cautious optimism. "It's like we have a completely new police force," comments an elderly woman. While it's not perfect, and there are still occasional incidents of misconduct, the department's quick and transparent responses to these occurrences reinforce the community's trust. Slowly but surely, the relationship between the police and the community is healing, building a foundation for a safer and more just future. The university auditorium is packed, with people standing in the aisles, all eager to hear Samantha Johnson. Her lecture, Deconstructing Institutional Racism, A Personal and Professional Journey, has become a highly anticipated event. Samantha steps onto the stage, commanding immediate attention. She shares her story, the incident with Henderson, the subsequent fight for police reform, interweaving it skillfully with broader analyses of systemic racism. Her legal background shines through as she dismantles flawed arguments and presents compelling data. But it is her vulnerability, her willingness to share the emotional impact of her experiences, that truly captivates the audience. Questions flow, and Samantha answers with grace and wisdom. After the lecture, a long line forms to speak with her. Samantha is approached by inspired students, activists seeking guidance, and even police officers from other cities eager to learn. Invitations to speak at national conferences and contribute to academic publications begin to pour in. Samantha embraces this new role with determination. Seeing it as a natural extension of her fight for justice, she becomes a powerful and respected voice in the movement against institutional racism, her impact reaching far beyond Millbrook. Henderson's nervousness is palpable as he joins Samantha on stage at a police reform conference. His journey of transformation has led him to this moment, speaking publicly alongside the woman he unjustly targeted. Henderson shares his story with brutal honesty, not shying away from the ugliness of his past actions. He details his awakening process, the hard truths he had to face about himself and the system that shaped him. The audience listens in stunned silence as he describes how he worked to dismantle his deeply ingrained biases. Henderson then turns to Samantha, tears in his eyes, and offers a sincere public apology. The moment is powerful, laden with emotion. Samantha, visibly moved, accepts his apology, emphasizing the importance of growth and change. Together, they outline their current collaborations. Henderson now leads awareness workshops for officers, using his own story as a powerful example. He works tirelessly on community outreach efforts, determined to rebuild the trust he helped to break. The unlikely partnership between Samantha and Henderson becomes a powerful symbol of transformation and reconciliation, offering tangible hope for real systemic change. Sitting in her office, Samantha flips through a scrapbook filled with headlines and photos from the past months. Each page evokes intense memories: the initial fear, the anger, the determination. She reflects on how the painful incident was transformed into a catalyst for significant change. Samantha acknowledges that the journey was arduous, filled with resistance and moments of doubt. Yet, Each obstacle overcome strengthened her resolve. She learned the power of vulnerability, how sharing her story opened hearts and minds. The importance of perseverance in the face of adversity became clear. Most profoundly, Samantha understood that real change requires not just new policies, but a transformation of hearts and minds. With a smile, she closes the scrapbook, grateful for the journey and eager for the challenges ahead. Mark Henderson adjusts his uniform, a familiar gesture that now carries a different weight. As he enters the police station, he is met with respectful nods from his colleagues. The path to regaining trust has been long and arduous, but Henderson persevered. Today, he leads the department's new racial awareness training program. His lectures, grounded in his own journey of transformation, have a profound impact. Henderson spends his off hours volunteering in minority communities, building bridges that once seemed impossible. Each positive interaction, each opened mind, reinforces his commitment. He knows he can never fully erase his past mistake, but he has found purpose in using that experience to effect real change. For Henderson, the badge that once symbolized power now represents a sacred responsibility to serve with justice and compassion. The Millbrook Police Department is unrecognizable compared to a year ago. The once drab corridors now display art, celebrating the community's diversity. In the briefing room, officers of various ethnicities discuss community policing strategies. The new mentorship program pairs veterans with recruits from diverse backgrounds, fostering mutual understanding. Regular feedback sessions with community leaders ensure ongoing accountability. The statistics tell a powerful story: a drop in complaints against the police, an increase in community cooperation, and an improvement in crime resolution. Delegations from other cities frequently visit, eager to learn from Millbrook's model. Chief Johnson watches with pride, knowing the transformation was difficult but worthwhile. The department is not perfect, but it is a shining example of progress and possibility. But it is committed to continuous progress, setting a new standard for fair and respectful policing. Millbrook Central Park is vibrant, decorated with colorful banners for the first annual Community Unity Festival. Families of all backgrounds mingle, enjoying food, music, and games. Police officers, now seen as community partners, actively participate in the festivities. Chief Johnson and community leaders cut a symbolic ribbon together, officially marking this new era of cooperation. Samantha watches the scene with emotion, remembering how it all started, with a painful incident. Children play carefree with smiling officers, a sight once unthinkable. At information booths, residents learn about new community policing programs and civic engagement opportunities. The air is filled with laughter and lively conversations, a testament to the power of mutual understanding and collective effort. This festival is not just a celebration, but a renewed commitment by the entire community to a future of respect and equality. Samantha and Thomas walk hand in hand through the park, observing the united community around them. Their eyes meet, communicating a deep understanding that goes beyond words. The journey of the past months challenged them as a couple, but also brought them closer in unexpected ways. They reflect on the long nights of intense discussions, the moments of shared vulnerability, and the mutual support in the most difficult times. Thomas expresses his admiration for Samantha's strength and determination, acknowledging how she inspired him to be a better leader. Samantha, in turn, thanks Thomas for his unwavering support, crucial to her resilience. Together, they have found a new purpose in their marriage, not just as life partners, but as allies in the fight for justice. As they plan for the future, there is a renewed sense of closeness and mutual commitment, forged in the heat of adversity and tempered by their shared dedication to change. Millbrook's transformation story spreads like wildfire, capturing national attention. Samantha and Henderson are invited to share their journey at a municipal leadership conference. The auditorium is silent as they recount their story, from the initial confrontation to their current collaboration. Mayors, police chiefs, and community activists listen intently, many visibly moved. Henderson's raw honesty about his past and his transformation touches hearts, while Samantha's passionate eloquence about the need for systemic change inspires minds. After the presentation, they are flooded with questions and requests for guidance. Cities across the country begin implementing programs inspired by Millbrook's model. Samantha and Henderson find themselves at the center of a growing movement. Their personal story catalyzing a wave of national reforms, they embrace this new role, determined to turn their painful experience into a lasting legacy of positive change. Before a diverse audience, Samantha concludes her speech at the one-year anniversary of the police reform. Her voice carries the weight of experience and the lightness of hope. She acknowledges the significant progress made, but emphasizes that the work is far from over. Samantha reminds everyone that combating prejudice is a continuous journey, requiring constant vigilance and self-reflection. Yet she reaffirms her unshakable belief in the possibility of real change. Looking out at the audience, Samantha sees determined faces, officers committed to justice, citizens engaged in the community, young people inspired to lead. She concludes with a call to action, challenging each individual to be an agent of change in their sphere of influence. As the applause echoes, Samantha feels a mix of gratitude for the journey and determination for the challenges ahead. She knows the fight against prejudice is never ending, but she is convinced that step by step, a more just and equitable world is possible.